Hey, Veronica, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jay. I'm excited to be here.
So what's really great about your story as I read through your bio is that you have kind of a variety of experience. A lot of the people that I interview have only been entrepreneurs. And in your case, you have been in the corporate world, you have that experience, and you have significant entrepreneurial experience as well. So I'd love for you to tell a little bit about your journey and what made you kind of stay in that corporate environment, what then made you want to have that transition. What does that look like for you over time?
I love this question because I get an opportunity to talk about my corporate history, which I don't often get to do anymore. But I would say in my background, I went the traditional route, going to school, getting a degree, and pursuing that corporate job in school, that's what everybody drives you to do. I'm lucky that I live in the Bay Area. So I'm right between San Francisco and the Silicon Valley. And so right out of school, I started to get recruited. And so my trajectory started with going to companies that were very unique. I had a niche. I didn't even know what that was back then, but I definitely was attracted to companies that were SaaS companies, service as a business, technology, biotechs, even financial services. But I always looked for companies, even back in the day, that incorporated the actual work with technology. And always was the one volunteering, even though I consider myself an introvert, when it comes to my career or business, always a very ambitious extrovert comes out. But with that, I was lucky that I was able to hold some positions early on with startup companies in the Silicon Valley. And that gave me that. I think I already had that entrepreneurial gene that most of us have early on. And being part of those early stage startup companies, pre-IPO, early stage funding, usually I had that niche, where it's like chaos. They needed a lot of structure, a lot of foundational things, operations. I was part of that team that developed those processes and hired people, and we figured it out as we went. And I realized that I loved that side of business. I got to merge my accounting, my finance with operations, and my love of technology. And so that started a very successful career in the corporate world where I got to satisfy that entrepreneurial side of me that I loved so much of, starting something, building something. And usually when we went public and a few months after, I knew it was time for me to move on. It was like bringing the next team and I was on to my next venture. I knew what my sweet spot was, what excited me, what I felt passionate about. And so that led me to just kind of go up the corporate ladder to achieve a lot of different positions, including the last 7 years or so in C-level positions as chief operating officer or chief financial officer. And that's where it gets interesting because, it starts to feel very repetitive. Been here, done that, feels the same. And it's so great to be part of something when you're building it, especially when you're building a team that you love and you believe in whatever it is that you're making or doing or delivering to the marketplace. But like many of us, I think that something happens in your life. There's a life event and it makes you question your priorities. And at that time, I will be honest with you and tell you that I had no life balance. Work-life balance was all work. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I just got a lot of satisfaction of the work, but that left very little room for a personal life, let alone great relationships, great health, eating well. None of that existed. It was just all work. I see you nodding your head, and it's like, I know you know what I'm talking about. The passionate entrepreneur. But at that time, I would say it was mid 2010, my grandmother, who was in her 90s, broke her ankle. And she raised me. I am the person I am because of my original life coach and all of her lessons and her great sense of humor. And at that time, I started to spread myself very thin. I wanted to be there for her. So go to her doctor's appointments, her physical therapy. And I started to resent having to ask for time off and explaining why I couldn't be at work as long as I usually was. And when I would say the guilt started to set in, right? when I was with my grandmother, I felt guilty about not being at work. When I was at
Mm.
work, I felt guilty about not being with my grandmother.
Mm.
And then let alone forget about home life. When I got home, instead of being the best version of myself, my family was getting the worst version, the depleted, overworked, overwhelmed, overstressed, all of the things. And I'm so thankful that I had the self-awareness to realize that my grandmother wasn't going to be around forever. And I didn't want to have the regret of not being there for her the way that she had always been there for me. And so while a lot of people had a lot to say about my decision to leave my corner office in San Francisco for my home office, as I decided to start a consulting business with, taking all of my experience and really relying on the relationships that I had built over the 20-year span of my corporate career, I made the decision, and I just made my family, my grandmother, and my home life a priority, because I knew that something was going to give. I was not showing up as a good version for anybody, let alone myself. So that's what led me to my first business, which was the consulting practice. And then later on, as I grew that to great success, we consultants cap out, and either we're going to grow an agency or we go a different route. And I decided to expand online. In 2016 is when I showed up online and started to learn a whole new way of doing business. But luckily that the structure for my corporate career, especially being in pre-IPO companies, stock options, I took that into my consulting business as well with my consulting clients and made that as a negotiating tactic, which has served my business really well. So here we are.
Wow, that's it's so interesting to me, because I think what the reality of like real life, in your case, your grandmother, on top of career and business and work, like it all just kind of blends together ultimately. And at some point you've got to decide on a day-to-day basis what matters most today. And what's going to give me the freedom to do that. Interestingly, I think about, one of the things I say about this show is I want to give people stories, tips, and ideas to help them build a business without being worn out and stressed out and ready to quit. That's kind of the line. And I think executives or leaders in large companies can end up in the same place that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners end up in. Because what you did was you said, all right, I'm going to exchange this corporate executive life for an entrepreneur life. But a lot of entrepreneurs end up in the same place as that executive, where that feels worn out and stressed out and ready to quit. So I'm curious, as you made that transition, because building a business is hard work and figuring all these things out is hard, even though you had a lot of past experience to leverage against. Sometimes most people start a business to create more freedom, to have more money, and do work that they love, right? Those are kind of the three big things.
Yes.
And so what kind of obstacles did you run into in those early years where you're like, all right, I'm going to start my own thing now. I'm leaving behind my corner office. I'm going to create my own corner office, if you will. Like what kind of barriers did you run into that you're like, well, I got to figure a way to get over this roadblock?
One of the barriers was the imposter syndrome. Even though I had 20 years of experience and I had so many accomplishments with those companies, whether it was, going through an IPO or mergers and acquisitions, all growing teams from like 5 people to 225 in less than a year, all these great big accomplishments. The moment that I started my own, that little voice, the doubt, right? Who am I? Do I have enough experience? Do I know enough? Where am I going to get the clients? Am I pricing enough? Am I going to make enough money? All those little voices of doubt, creep in. And so I think that one of the challenges that I had was I needed to get over that very quickly. And one of the things that I did, and I'm so happy that I just started sharing the doubts that I was having. A couple of people, CEOs who have known me for many years, put me in touch with, I don't want to call her a mindset coach because it was more than that, but it was almost somebody that, gave me a lot of insight as to helping me to coach myself to get over that roadblock that I was having that so many of us have. It's the imposter syndrome. And like we say, you know, new level, new devil. Every time you're going to go and up level or make a change in your business or in your life, those doubts are going to come in. And so the best thing you can do is either get a mentor, hire a coach, go talk to other peers that can maybe give you some tips and strategies, tools to add to your toolbox so that you can then recognize when you're going through that and tackle it head on and get busy like proving it wrong. And that's what was in my case. It's like doing that exercise of, okay, list out all of your accomplishments. What did you learn? What do you know? Who do you know? The inventory of skills becomes such a tactical exercise in order for you to see it in your own handwriting in black and white, staring back at you. It's like, oh my God, I've done a lot. I've also been resourceful and I figured it out. So that was one of those early on challenges that's not tangible. It's all in your mind, which is why now I just focus on that with my clients as well. It's like the mindset matters.
Yeah, it's interesting because the first podcast I had today, we talked a lot about mindset, and that was, it's just such a big deal. And I think it's interesting because that imposter syndrome, especially, something I've certainly struggled with. I mean, I remember as I was approaching the 20th anniversary for our company, I was really struggling with it because we were starting to get a lot more attention. I personally was starting to get a lot more attention. I had just written a book. I started this podcast, and part of me is going, well, hold on, who am I to write a book? I mean, you know, there's so many things I don't know, and wow, I still make so many mistakes, and you know, and there's so much of that because I think we talk about the early entrepreneur a lot, but I mean, I was a late stage entrepreneur. I've been doing this my whole life. I built my first website when I was 12. I started my business when I was 17. We've grown year over year, every single year for 20 years in a row. And at the 20th year, I still felt like I didn't have it. And that wasn't true. You know, like that wasn't true. I am good at what I do. I do know what I'm talking about. I can help a lot of people. I can have a huge impact, but that belief system like changes everything. So like talk about mentors, like you said, you know, hire a mentor, hire a coach, you know, get somebody else in your life. What did that look like for you? Like what changed when you were able to find tools and resources to take control of your mindset instead of your mindset controlling you?
It was interesting because up until then, I thought I had always invested in my personal development and that I had things figured out and I knew how to do it for myself. But once I started to work with somebody who that's their total focus, I realized that in order for me to, this is not a one and done kind of thing, right? You don't work on your mindset once and then you get over it and on you go. It's going to show up over and over again. And somehow I got it. I understood that in order for me to get through this, I needed to really understand it and put it into practice. And what it looked like for me was, getting a coach, reading books, listening to podcasts, also surrounding myself with people who had been through other challenges and were a little bit ahead of me so they could say, like I do with my clients now, and I say, this is going to come up with you, and here's how you're going to tackle it. And for me, I would constantly be asking myself, is this true, or is this a story I'm telling myself? And if I felt like it wasn't true, I would get busy, like we just mentioned, it's like disproving it and looking for the other signs that it wasn't true. And that's what just, again, I go back to, call me old school. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. You know, putting pen to paper, there's just something about writing it and having things back, you know, you're looking at it, you wrote it, and it's now staring back at you in your handwriting. And so for me, I know that that tool has been strengthened over the years, and I believe it because it works. It gets me out of that. I'm not paralyzed by fear or doubt or lack of confidence. I just get busy getting through that to the other side. And that is a skill that takes time to learn and to implement and to see the results over and over again.
You know, it's so interesting because I think when I was younger, I don't think this, I did think like this. I believed that a lot of this mindset stuff and like positive self-talk and like writing down truths and things like that was just kind of like hokey, you know, Tony Robbins stuff. And it turns out Tony Robbins actually knows what he's talking about with a lot of this stuff. And there's a lot of real positive impact on life. One thing that, as you were talking, I was thinking is, we all are like aware, I think, more so of the condition our bodies are in because we have mirrors to see them, right? So we can be like, oh, wow, okay, or I got pants that don't quite fit me anymore. I got a few of those, and I'm like, okay, I probably need to lose a few pounds. But our minds don't necessarily have that same kind of like obvious nature. And I don't know why it just stood out to me, but it's so obvious when I need to lose 15 pounds to me. It's not so obvious when I need to like adjust my mindset a little bit. I need to find tools and resources to figure that out.
That's a great example. It really is, because you're so right. The physical is a lot easier to kind of point out or to feel, where the mindset is so much more tangible. And in corporate America, we don't talk about mindset. I didn't hear that term until I came on, into the entrepreneurial world. I never, ever heard that term in corporate America. Or maybe we called it somewhere else, like positive thinking, affirmations, but it's all the same thing. It's like our thoughts are so powerful. Our thoughts, our words become our beliefs. And so we have to be very careful about what we're feeding our own selves. Absolutely.
I just love that stuff. I think it's super interesting, and it's something I need to pour more into for sure. I was looking at your website, and I always am interested to see how people position themselves, and you position yourself very clearly. It says, I help accounting professionals monetize their experience and start their own consulting business online. So what do you do for somebody else, and why that niche? Why do you do what you do ultimately is really the question.
That niche came out of my own experience. And I'll just back up for a second. When I was doing my CFO consulting practice grew very quickly. And one of the things that my clients would ask me to do was to help them hire, to staff up their departments, whether it was in accounting, finance, and a few other areas that are general corporate areas, departments. And no matter how many times I would interview people and I would introduce myself and who I was for that company, business consultant or whatever the title, it didn't matter, but usually consultant. And they would always ask me, how do I do what you're doing? And that's what started to lead down the expansion of, I love the consulting clients that I have. I feel that's what keeps me relevant, and I'm on the other side of the table there. But I also saw a need to help these employees or corporate professionals to see that there's life beyond corporate America, and how they didn't have to like disregard all of their experience and all of their knowledge and skill set that they had been accumulating, but rather use it to then create something of their own. I help them to see what's possible, because that's what someone did for me. I help them to see, hey, here's how you can take something that you've already built and have been, building throughout. And it's hard work to for your career to go up that corporate ladder. And so here's how you can leverage it so that you don't have to disregard it and start over. And the thing that I really help them with is that lack of confidence, or not even being able to vision or visualize what is possible. And also to do away with not focusing on the wrong things, not focusing on the things that doesn't serve them early on, to get some social proof for themselves that they could do it. And so I'm kind of like that shortcut of like, here's what's possible, and here are the necessary, like just 5 steps to get it done, to go from corporate to consultant.
Yeah, I love that idea of creating a shortcut, because, I think about my own journey, and it's taken me a long time to figure out, business to a point where I feel really comfortable with it. And as soon as I get comfortable with it, it makes me want to start something totally new, which is where I'm at right now. But I think what happens so often is people feel like they need to figure it out on their own, but that's not the best way. The best way is to find somebody else who's already walked that path before and go, hey, you've done this. What worked? What didn't work? I mean, that's what this show is all about, ultimately. The show is all about talking to other people who have been in business for over a decade and going, hey, what worked for you, and what didn't? What things can I avoid when I'm dealing with building a team or growing client base? Because if you're, one thing I'm thinking about as a consultant for you is, if you're the primary person, the only person that people want to talk to, your time is limited. Like, you only have so much time, so you can just charge more. But at some point, like, it's all about, it has to be you, where if you're able to scale that and create other opportunities for other people, that's kind of what you've done. Exactly.
Because you do, as a consultant, we all hit that cap. either as an independent consultant, there's only so many hours, and either you start building a firm or an agency, and hire other people and either train them your way so that, yeah, they're following the Veronica system, you know,
Right.
but, or the you're going to have unhappy clients, and nobody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I started to realize that. And I did start going down the agency model, and I still use subcontractors, but they do it my way, because it's the way that I can communicate to the client. The consistency matters, and I'm able to close on whatever client meeting that I have by assuring them that it's going to be me reviewing, or my process, my system, even though it's going to be other people doing some of the work. But then on the one-on-one, on the coaching side, it's the letting them see how they can also have a consulting business and then ultimately expand beyond that one-on-one model, because we don't want them to cap out either. I want to show them that there is absolutely an opportunity for them to go beyond that, capping out the hours, trading dollars for hours.
Yeah. Anytime people can get away from trading dollars for hours, they should. I mean, it's just a painful slope of
you're creating another job for
progress.
Yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's the difference between owning a job and owning a business is the business can survive without you.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's what I've been working hard on is creating a business that will survive without me ultimately. But as you're talking, one of the things I'm thinking about is I always say every successful business needs 4 key elements. They need the right people, the right product, the right process, and the right promotion. They just happen to all be P's. But and so thinking about process, that's one of the areas that I struggled with the most, because I'm not a detail person. I'm a kind of a wing it kind of guy, which works fine up until a certain point, and then you cap out and you can't do that anymore. And so it sounds like that's kind of a lot of what you're able to do is help people with that process side of going, hey, here's the plan. I just need you to follow the plan. Use your experience and your knowledge and your intelligence, but just follow this plan and you'll be able to pull it off. Is that kind of the idea?
Exactly. And that's the framework works. I've tested it myself, but also on my clients. And it's what they fight me on is because they want to do so many other things. And I'm saying, if you follow these 5 steps, it's a framework. It's a repeatable framework. You can scale it, or you can, fine tune it, tweak it wherever you see it need it, wherever you see that it needs it. But start with this. I almost have to convince them and plead with them to trust me. It works, because they don't think it can be that simple. And sometimes I think we make it harder on ourselves, when really, to start with, you don't have to have the signature model or the signature business model. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we do this. We think we make a decision. It's not forever. We can change it. It'll evolve just as we grow and we learn more and we experiment and we test and we get those results. It will evolve. It's okay if you make a decision and it doesn't prove to be the biggest decision or the big return on that investment. You can change your mind. You can evolve.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I just had a podcast recording not that long ago with Tom, who's the founder of Aweber, and he was basically saying, like, his big thing is he's willing to he basically said, I'm willing to make quick decisions for things that I can change quickly. So if it's something that I can just go back on and go, hey, you know what, that didn't work, we're going to change it back to this, I can make a quick decision on it. Or if it's something that it's going to be hard to change it back, that needs a lot more thought and intentionality. And he also said, like, take one step towards it, which is kind of what you're saying here is like, just move towards it, see what works, and then adjust. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship's all about.
Exactly. We go back to that minimum, sorry, but it's the MVP, right? But it is, I call it the MVS because I'm not in a product, but I'm in a service. So get busy creating and putting something out there so you can get some feedback and either tweak it, make it better, or change it up, see how you feel delivering that service or what kind of feedback you get from the people that you're serving.
So I think that's great. I love the idea of like a minimal viable service. I hate actually I hate like the minimal thing because it sounds like it's not good, but it's not really what it means. It just means let's start with something small, get something to work, and then go from there. So thinking about that idea of creating kind of this irresistible service offer, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck and they go, I don't know how to package things. I don't know how to price things. I don't know, and so they just revert to like, oh, I'm $50 an hour, I'm $100 an hour, I'm $200 an hour. Like they just fall back to that because that's easy, right? So what are some good first steps for somebody who's thinking about wanting to create an irresistible service offer? What does that look like?
One of the factors for creating an offer like that's irresistible to a potential client is also going to be delivering something that you love to do. Something that you're good at, that you're an expert in, and that you're excited to do, because it will translate. When you go and put an offer or you're talking about it and you're highlighting the benefit or the value that you're going to bring and how their life, the prospect is going to benefit from this service that you deliver, it will show in how excited you are talking about it and how, you geek out over the whole process. And so it starts with, don't make an offer on something that comes easy to you, but you don't like to do. It goes both ways. The person on the other side will be able to tell whether or not you're excited about. And I think back to, I met a tax professional years ago. She loved taxes. She lived it, breathed it. It got excited about it. It was just an enthusiasm.
That's not something I can visualize.
No, right? And me neither. And that's, numbers are my thing. But I tell you that every time I met her or spoke to her, I got excited because it was so contagious, her enthusiasm. She loved it. And you know what it did for me as her client? It made me feel confident that she knew her stuff, that she was going to be so excited to work on my project, on my taxes, and she was going to be up to date on all the latest rules, regulations, policy changes because of the way that she showed up talking about that thing. And so it starts with, make an offer on something that you love to do, that you're an expert in, that you're resourceful in, that people come to you and it's easy for you. And then on the other side, make sure that you don't make it so hard to deliver. Make sure that you're delivering a good experience for the client and that you're highlighting what it is that you're going to help them to transform, how this is going to alleviate stress or save them time or save them money or be able to deliver something themselves. Highlight the benefit, not just don't highlight how much time it's going to take you or how much money you're going to charge them. No. What is the benefit for them? Creating an irresistible offer a lot of time is in the messaging. It's not the actual offer. We can all create, I think of myself as I used to create budget spreadsheets very easily. It's just Excel formulas, financial spreadsheets. It's my thing. I love it. I can make them very easily. But when I started to talk about them, I wasn't talking about how many tabs in the Excel workbook it was going to have, how many. No, I was, saying, I'm going to make you the kind of, budget where you're going to plug in a few numbers and it's going to be able to generate all of this. How would that feel? How would it feel for you to be able to just key in a few things and suddenly you've got this amazing 3, financial package for your board deck, or, just really painting that picture. So an irresistible offer, yes, it should be something that that your prospect needs. It should be priced, well, like do your research in the marketplace, but it should also invoke passion, excitement, relief, transformation to your potential client.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of messaging, I mean, to be fair, I do a lot of messaging. So of course I think it's important. I'm a little biased, but really, like, I have just seen that transform so much over time. I used to care, in the early days, I just built basic websites and did some basic design work. Now we're a full-blown digital agency moving towards what we call a business growth agency. That's kind of our new vision.
I like that.
And what would happen is I put so much emphasis on the design and the style. I cared about what things looked like. I didn't care as much about the words. I didn't realize how important they were. But now I always say people only buy products or services after they read or hear the words that make them want to buy it. That's it. Yeah. And ultimately, what I think with a mistake a lot of us make, I see a lot of companies make this mistake, and I used to make this mistake, is we make it all about us. And at the end of the day, it's not about us, it's about the customer. What can we do for them? How are we going to make their life better? There's a great illustration of this that I saw one time, and it had a skateboard, and it showed a kid jumping over a rock on a skateboard. And it said, this is one ad. And the other ad had the skateboard all torn apart, and it was like, this is a greased ball bearing, and this is a this is this part, and this is made out of this steel and this. And it basically said, sell this, which was the kid jumping over the rock. We're selling the experience. We're selling the outcome. We're not selling the input, or to your point, we're not selling the tabs on the Excel sheet. We're not selling the formulas in the boxes. We're selling the fact that it's going to make their life easier. We're selling the fact that they're going to have better data quicker, sooner, without as much headache and stress. And so like that messaging idea is really important for people to hear because it really affects like the outcome of success.
I agree. 100%. And it doesn't, we don't always start out that way. I did something similar myself, but it evolves, as we grow and we learn and we get feedback. Or I love when I hear people, my very first course program that I launched with, I kept using the word simple, but then I would describe it. I made the mistake that so many new entrepreneurs with a new course make. I threw everything in the kitchen sink in there. Yeah. Because I needed to justify the value of the price. And I am so grateful to the audience that I had in a Facebook group community. I had that at that time, and they said, you say simple, but it doesn't sound simple. It doesn't look simple. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, the disconnect was so obvious. And I went back and I tweaked it, and the second launch was so much better because I realized my big mistake, and that came with feedback. And again, we put something out and got feedback, and we were able to fix it. So it's not the end of the world. Those are learning lessons. They're not mistakes.
That's right. I see so many businesses too that they struggle with this because we always tell people from a messaging perspective, we want them to have a clear 3-step plan. What does it look like to work with you? Or what does it look like once they work with you? And people are like, well, I know, but it's more than that. And I'm like, I understand that. But the customer needs the simplicity. And why 3 things? Because it's easy to remember. 1, 2, 3. Like we remember 3 things. We can remember 3 digits in a zip code. We can, or in an area code. We can remember 3 digits really easily. And so give them 3 simple steps in the process versus like, here's all the 50 things you're going to learn. They're like, oh my gosh, that looks really exhausting.
Yeah. I don't have time for that. We help them to talk themselves out of it. Right. Out of working with us.
Absolutely. So I want to circle back. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and I always kind of put this towards the later part of the conversation, talking about work-life balance. I hate that term in general because it means something different to everybody. And I don't really like the way it's phrased, but I'm interested because you said earlier at the beginning of my career, I had no balance at all. And I had to kind of figure out what my plan looked like so I could take care of myself, I could take care of the people around me, and still have a great career and a great job that I love. So I'm curious for you, we talked about mindset, but like how have those things changed now as an entrepreneur? Because it's easy and not necessarily wrong to be embedded in work all the time. I mean, there's plenty of people who work all the time. They love it. They're perfectly happy with it. And the people around them aren't stressed out about it. So that's fine. So like, what does that look like for you now? And what has it looked like in different seasons of life?
So right now it looks, I work with like letters, like I think PAD, priority, automate, and delegate. And so the priority comes in like, and I think I've heard you talk about this also, Jay, in other podcasts that you have, other podcast episodes, sorry, that you have to look at things that cross your desk or come up during the day and determine, is this something that needs to be done right now or can it wait till later? And is the same thing goes for me with the priority. Is this something that needs to be addressed right now? And usually the next question is like, is this something that I need to do, or do I have someone on my team that can do it? Or do I know someone who can get it done? And if it's the later, most of the time, it's not a priority. It can wait. If I see a thing that keeps getting pushed out into the tomorrow list and the day after that, it usually gets dropped off very quickly. So the P for priority, that's one thing. And I'm very disciplined with that because both personally and professionally, usually we know, okay, now who? And usually I can automate it or delegate it. And the automation comes, again, that's the corporate background in me, that a lot of structure, a lot of systems, a lot of what we call SOPs, right? The standard operating procedures. I'm a big user of the video app Loom. And so now I do too, because I not only communicate with my team, but I communicate with my clients. And I even have CEOs of very large companies using Loom now because it's just such a quick way for you to launch it, point something out, you record it, and it also becomes a training. And what I do with clients as well as my team, I'll say sometimes it's not a step-by-step, very formal training, but what it is a quick communication of best practices. Hey, this is an example of what I'd like to use going forward. So we have a very big library that it takes time to do that. But if you already go into it knowing that you're going to want to automate and delegate, you're killing two birds with one stone with those video trainings or a quick snapshot. I'm a big user of Snagit, which is by TechSmith, not an affiliate. But, I've used it from even way back in my corporate days when it was just like an image, Snagit. They now do video and desktop videos and all kinds of things. But another thing, it's like a quick little picture with a few notes. And if I just take that, knowing that the end result is going to alleviate my workload by being able to automate a process, communicate with a team or a client as to how we want to do something, that I'm then able to delegate. So PAD, priority, automation, delegate.
I love it. And anybody that out there is listening, if you've not checked out Loom, neither one of us are affiliates for the record. It really, but even if we were, whatever, it really is a great product. We use it here all the time, loom.com. I think they even have a free version that's great, and they have a paid version. It's an amazing piece of software.
It really is. And getting better. The best $10 a month I spend because it's just that I have the paid version. You can create just to go on a little tangent, but you can create folders and label it and share the link. It's so quick, and it allows you to be able to relieve your workload. Right. And so going back to your question as to like what it has looked for me in seasons, obviously we have very busy seasons, especially if we're launching a new product, a new service, a course, webinar, whatever, or you're going on vacation. One thing that my partner Eric and I are committed to traveling more, although not in this season, right? We're all homebound, but we'll leave. We went to Africa for 3 weeks, or we went to Paris and out France and Spain, or a lot of other vacations. We'll be gone 2, 3, 4 weeks. Well, the business still needs to get going, and it's important to prepare for that. So that would be a very busy season leading up to that vacation, or there's a life event. But no matter what, it's about constantly prioritizing. For me, like I said, in my corporate career, very little balance until I had a huge life event that I'm very happy with my choices of making the pivot and choosing family over the career. But that didn't mean that I had to do away with all my experience. I just pivoted to something else, which was entrepreneurship. And as starting a business was a very busy season. However, I did it on my time. I could still take 2 hours of my day, go be with my grandmother, attend her meetings, visit with her. And then that made me work so much. My mind was free to work. I didn't have the stress or the guilt that went along with that because I had made my commitments, my priorities were all met. And so I was able to be a lot more free to work on the business and get a lot more done and have the productivity that came with it.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to think through. And I think whenever I talk about this, the reason I like to talk about it is I think a lot of entrepreneurs end up getting burnt out. Yes. And they think that they're doing something wrong. And the reality is they're probably just going through a season they need to figure it out. Because we've all been in that place before, and it's just a matter of leaning on the right people and the right knowledge and the right resources and the right coaches and mentors and all that kind of stuff to try and figure out what that path looks like for us. One thing I'm curious about, you'd mentioned using contractors, building a team. Those are things, especially in your early entrepreneur days, people just start doing things themselves, and then they're all by themselves, and they go, you know what, I need some help. And it's never been easier than it is now to get people from all over the place to help you with all kinds of different things. So how have you learned to leverage contractors well to help you kind of have extra hands in the day, basically?
I was lucky that, again, going back to my corporate days, I used consultants to help us with a lot of different projects, whether it was a project that had a start and end date, or a consultant who was always like kind of like on call to help us throughout the growth of the business. And so I was familiar with how I could use contractors. What I wasn't familiar with is where to go to find them and how to train them without being in the same room. And that's where I started to ask people, in Facebook communities and Facebook group communities, I should say, or other, if I became part of a mastermind or some sort of group program, I would ask, how do they find their assistant, or how do they find that? But I also went back to my network. My network, I would say, I can't stress this enough. My network for me has been a very big part of my success, because it was about all those contacts that I had accumulated over the years, whether it was people I worked with, people that worked for me, people I met at conferences, partnerships, all kinds of relationships. I went back to my network and thought, who do I already know that either knows how to do this like I like, especially if it was a contractor that was going to be helping me with my CFO consulting firm. Who do I already know and trust, that I know their work ethic, I know their style, I know that they, their integrity, all the things that come with a work ethic. And I usually found I found them and they were interested in working with me or for me, or they knew somebody that they could then refer me to. And I started to interview them. And so for me, there was like subcontractors that I looked for and hired for my consulting company. And those were different than the ones that I hired for my online business. Because with the online business, I found it to be easier since it's all remote. And usually the people that I was hiring were very familiar with being remote contractors. And so we kind of cut to the chase of what technology we were going to use, how often we were going to meet, and the time zones. Some time zones are I think I have a couple of people that are 3 hours behind, 3 hours ahead, 15 hours. It starts to become, you almost need a clock for all these different time zones, but it doesn't matter, because as long as the work gets done and you have a way to communicate. We use Asana in my business as a project management system. And so, yeah, it becomes just a matter of setting expectations, communications, and some training, a lot of training.
A lot of training is right.
Yeah.
That's true. That's the piece that's like, oh, by the way, there's going to be a lot of that, especially if you want it done the way that you want it done, which you do,
Exactly.
because there has to be a certain level of quality and standard. But I think that's just something for people to think about if they've never, hired somebody before. There's so much opportunity right now. You don't have to hire a full-time employee to start. You can just hire somebody to do a job. You can hire them to take care of some tasks, especially things that you find on your day-to-day, like what you were talking about, where maybe they're repetitive things you find yourself doing it over and over again, that you could outline or create a Loom video. It's even better if it's a digital thing. And then you can hand that off and say, hey, every time this happens, I want you to do all these things. And maybe it's something that can't be automated by a robot or a tool or a system. And a person needs to do those things. And it's amazing to have those kind of resources and people without even needing to hire a full-time employee if you're not at that point yet. So people need to think about those things. It's valuable. All right. So we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I always like to kind of give you a chance to think about the idea of building a business that lasts. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about creating something that's not going to disappear tomorrow. Most businesses fail in the first year. Very few make it to the 5th year. And if you make it past 10, you're doing pretty well. You're in the top couple of percentile. So what's some parting advice or counsel that you would give to other entrepreneurs and business leaders who are trying to build a business that lasts? What should they focus on?
So I've got a couple of thoughts on that. And the first one that I want to say is protect your yeses. You don't have to say yes to every opportunity or job or client that comes your way. If you do that, then what you're saying no to something else, and you end up building a business that doesn't even resemble the vision that you had, because you're not clear about who you want to work with, how you want to work in your business, on your business, and how you want to build a team. So when I say protect your yeses, that applies both personal and professional life. because sometimes they overlap or they are very close integrated, especially if you work from home and have a family. And so please protect your yeses. Think about the big vision, your big why. Why is it that you want to start a business, run a business, grow a business? And if that thing that crosses your path, an email, opportunity, invitation, is not in alignment with your vision, pass. There will be another opportunity that's probably more in alignment. And early on, we don't feel confident enough. We think we need to say yes to every client that comes our way. And you know what? That is such a surefire way of building a business that you don't love, working with clients that you don't love because you felt like you needed to say yes. Trust in yourself. That mindset goes back to that. Believe that you can end up working with clients that you're going to love, doing the kind of work that you're going to be, that you love, are passionate about, that you want to get excited about doing every single day. So that's one. I have, going back to, I know that we've talked about mindset quite a few times in this podcast, but it's about also your words, what you're feeding your mind, who you're surrounding yourself with. Now more than ever, you can join groups, you can become part of a program, get that really strong community around you that you can exchange ideas or talk about when you're having a difficult time or challenging season in your business, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. And the sooner you can surround yourself or become part of a community that you can find solace in, or just a kinship with, where you can feel like that re-energized. Sometimes all it takes is somebody saying a few words to you for you to get back on track. And unfortunately, having an online business or any kind of business, and if you have family members or other friends and family members that don't totally understand that because they've always been employees, you're not going to get that support there, and you may feel frustrated that they don't support you or understand you. It's unfair. They don't know your world. So go to a community, build and be part of a community that you can be with other like-minded people. And if they can be even ahead of you, you can all learn from each other and support each other at different seasons of the business. So those are two things.
That's really good counsel. I always say it can be lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to be. And you have to surround yourself with people who, you know, are in a similar season or mindset or area of life. And you have to have people ahead of you, and you have to have people that you're teaching or you're pouring into. And I think you have to have somebody that believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. I think that's really important.
Amen, Jay.
And I love the idea of protecting your yeses. One of the most profound things that somebody said to me years ago, and I'm still struggling with today, is that every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to 1,000 others. And so the thing that we struggle with is we don't want to tell people no, especially people like me. Like, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. That means I'm a performer. I want people to like me. I want to be helpful. I want to do good, and I want to be seen doing good. Like, that's the full honest truth behind it. But by saying yes to one thing, I'm saying no to 1,000 others. And so I love that idea of what you said of protect your yeses. It's just so important. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
So my hub is my website, veronicasagastume.com. I know that's a hard name to know how to spell, so I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes, but that's where people can grab free resources. I'm constantly sharing resources that I create for the audience who wants to either start a consulting business or run and grow, scale it. So go ahead, veronicasagastume.com, and my social media channels are there as well. So come on by, check it out.
Awesome. Veronica, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure to have you. And I think you've given a lot of insights that will be helpful to the audience.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jay. Good to be here.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there, where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.